Hey, son. It is Tuesday morning in 1973. Your mother is standing at the kitchen counter with a loaf of Wonder Bread, mayonnaise straight from the fridge, and a knife she has not washed since breakfast. She makes your sandwich for school, wraps it in wax paper, and puts it in your lunchbox next to a warm thermos of soup. The sandwich will sit unrefrigerated for 4 hours. Nobody dies. Nobody even gets sick. Tonight, we are diving into something stranger than your conspiracy theory uncle at Thanksgiving. The kitchen rules of 1970s America. The ones your grandmother swore by. The ones that would make a modern food safety inspector weep into their clipboard. The ones that, against all odds and current FDA guidelines, actually worked. Before we go further, if you are enjoying this strange journey through vanished American life, I would be grateful if you would hit that like button and subscribe. We are also now live on Spotify, so if you prefer listening there, the link is in the description. And if you have memories of these kitchen tricks or your own grandmother's questionable food wisdom, drop them in the comments. I read every single one. Now then, some questions for you to consider. What did a kitchen smell like in 1975 when nothing was pre-washed and everything came in packaging you could not recycle? How did your mother know when the chicken was done without a meat thermometer? What happened to leftovers before anyone had heard of meal prep? Why did everyone keep butter on the counter? And how did an entire generation survive drinking well water that had never been tested? It is 1976 now. The avocado green refrigerator hums in the corner. Someone is frying something in a cast iron skillet that has never seen soap. A pot of coffee percolates on the stove, and everything is about to make sense. Let us start with the chicken. You bring it home from the grocery store in 1977, still wrapped in plastic and sitting in its own pinkish juice. You unwrap it over the sink. You turn on the cold water. And you rinse that bird thoroughly under the tap, inside and out, watching the water run clear, feeling like you are doing exactly what responsible cooks are supposed to do. Your mother does it. Her mother did it. Every cookbook mentions it casually, as if it is as obvious as preheating the oven. You are washing away bacteria, you think. You are starting clean. The water splashes against the chicken skin and sprays in tiny droplets across the sink basin, onto the counter, onto the dish soap bottle sitting nearby. You reach inside the cavity and rinse there too, making sure everything is clean. The chicken feels cold and slippery in your hands. You are thorough. You are careful. You set the rinsed chicken on a plate and pat it dry with paper towels. The same paper towels you then use to wipe down the counter where a few drops of water have landed. Everything feels hygienic. Everything feels correct. This is standard practice in every kitchen in America. Betty Crocker's cookbook mentions it. The Joy of Cooking mentions it. Your home economics teacher in high school demonstrated the proper technique. Rinse the chicken, pat it dry, proceed with cooking. Nobody questions this. Nobody suggests it might be wrong. What you do not know, what nobody knows in 1977, is that rinsing the chicken does not remove bacteria. It spreads it. Every drop of water that splashes off that raw chicken carries salmonella and campylobacter with it. Onto your counter, into your sink, onto anything within 2 feet of where you are standing. The bacteria you are trying to wash away is actually being distributed across your kitchen in an invisible mist. But here is the strange part. People do not get sick. Or rather, they do not get sick at catastrophic rates that would make anyone stop and reconsider the practice. Your mother rinsed chicken this way for 40 years. Her friends did the same. Millions of home cooks across the country stood at their sinks every week, rinsing whole chickens under cold water, and somehow most of them were fine. The USDA will not officially recommend against washing chicken until the 2000s. For decades, it is just what you do. Part of the ritual of preparing poultry. You wash vegetables, you wash fruit, you wash chicken. It makes intuitive sense. Washing equals cleaning. Cleaning equals safety. The logic is simple and completely wrong. The truth is that proper cooking kills the bacteria. The oven heated to 350 degrees for an hour does what the water never could. But the rinsing ritual persists because it feels right. Because your grandmother did it. Because doing something feels better than doing nothing, even when that something is counterproductive. When you finally learn, sometime in the 2010s, that you have been spreading bacteria around your kitchen for decades, it feels strange. All those years of careful rinsing, all that attention to cleaning the bird properly, and it turns out the best practice is to do nothing. Take the chicken from the package, put it straight into the roasting pan, throw away the packaging, wash your hands, and cook it. No rinsing, no water, no splashing. The 1970s kitchen operated on inherited wisdom that sometimes turned out to be inherited misunderstanding. But the chicken always tasted good, and most people somehow survived the spray. The butter dish sits on the counter, not in the refrigerator. It has been there since your mother bought the house in 1968. Covered with a glass dome or a plastic lid, the butter softens through the morning and stays spreadable all day. You use it for toast at breakfast, for sandwiches at lunch, for rolls at dinner. Nobody considers this dangerous. Nobody even considers this unusual. Room temperature butter is simply how butter exists in a functioning kitchen. The butter dish itself is usually ceramic or glass, sometimes with a small lid that fits over the top. Your mother keeps one stick of butter in it at a time. The stick sits there getting softer as the day warms up. By afternoon, you can press your finger into it easily. By evening, it is almost spreadable with a feather. This is the point. This is the entire reason for keeping butter on the counter. Cold butter tears bread. Soft butter glides across it. Every morning your father makes toast. He uses the butter from the counter. He does not wait for it to soften or try to spread something that has just come from the refrigerator and has the consistency of a brick. The butter is ready. It has been ready since yesterday. It will be ready tomorrow. This is how butter works in 1975. Your mother replaces the stick when it gets low. She pulls a new stick from the refrigerator, unwraps it, sets it in the dish. Sometimes she cuts it in half if the dish is small. The butter that stays in the refrigerator remains hard, waiting its turn. The butter on the counter does all the work. Nobody worries about the butter going bad. It is salted butter, which helps preserve it. It sits in a covered dish, which keeps dust and debris out. The house is not particularly hot. Even in summer, the kitchen stays relatively cool. The butter softens, but does not melt into a puddle. It holds its shape. It stays good. This practice would alarm a modern food safety expert. Butter is a dairy product. Dairy products require refrigeration. Leaving butter at room temperature invites bacterial growth, rancidity, spoilage. The official recommendation is clear. Butter belongs in the refrigerator. Take it out shortly before use if you want it soft, but do not leave it out permanently. And yet, the butter on the counter never seems to go bad. Your mother keeps it there for weeks at a time through summer and winter. It never develops an off smell. It never tastes sour. It never makes anyone sick. The butter just sits there, doing its job, getting used up and replaced in a steady rotation that has no beginning and no end. There is something almost defiant about the butter dish on the counter. It represents a choice to prioritize function over fear. Cold butter is difficult to use. Room temperature butter is easy. The risk, if there even is one, seems worth it for the daily convenience. And in practice, the risk never seems to materialize. The truth is that butter has a lower water content than most dairy products, and the salt acts as a preservative. Butter can sit at room temperature for days or even weeks without spoiling, especially if it is covered and the room is not excessively hot. The science, in this case, actually supports the practice. But nobody in 1975 knows the science. They just know the butter tastes fine. Modern homes often keep butter refrigerated because modern food culture emphasizes caution. But people who grew up with butter on the counter remember it fondly. The ease of it, the simplicity, the way it was always ready when you needed it. A small luxury that required no thought and no planning. Just butter, soft and available, in a dish on the counter where it had always been. It is Monday evening, and your mother is thinking about Tuesday dinner. She pulls a package of ground beef from the freezer, still wrapped in white butcher paper with the date written in marker on the front. She sets it on a plate on the kitchen counter and leaves it there overnight. By Tuesday afternoon, the meat has thawed completely, soft enough to break apart with your hands. She cooks it that evening for spaghetti. This is the standard thawing method, not the refrigerator method, not the cold water method. Just counter, just air, just time. The package sits there through the night. The kitchen is dark and quiet. The meat slowly warms from frozen solid to cold, to cool, to room temperature. By morning, the outside is thawed, but the center is still frozen. By midday, the whole thing is softened. The plate catches any liquid that seeps from the package. Your mother checks it once or twice just to see where it is in the process. No rush, no concern. This is how you thaw meat. The same thing happens with chicken, with pork chops, with roast. If it is frozen and you need it for dinner, you take it out in the morning and leave it on the counter. Sometimes you remember to take it out the night before. The timing is loose, imprecise, based on feel more than science. You know meat takes a certain number of hours to thaw depending on its size and shape. You plan accordingly. Nobody talks about the danger zone. Nobody mentions that bacteria multiply rapidly on meat that sits between 40 and 140 degrees Fahrenheit. The entire concept of the danger zone is not part of home cooking vocabulary in the 1970s. You know meat can go bad. You know bad meat smells bad. But you do not know about bacterial growth rates or temperature charts or USDA guidelines. You just know that meat left on the counter thaws by dinner time. The modern recommendation is clear. Thaw meat in the refrigerator where it stays cold enough to inhibit bacterial growth. If you are in a hurry, thaw it in cold water, changing the water every 30 minutes. If you are really in a hurry, use the microwave. But never, ever leave meat on the counter to thaw. The surface of the meat warms up long before the center thaws, creating ideal conditions for bacteria to flourish. But your mother does not know this, and somehow it does not matter. The meat thaws, she cooks it. Your family eats it. Nobody gets food poisoning. This happens week after week, year after year. Frozen meat on the counter on Monday, spaghetti on Tuesday, everyone fine on Wednesday. There is a possible explanation that nobody discusses. Cooking kills bacteria. If the meat reaches a high enough internal temperature, the bacteria die. Your mother always cooks meat thoroughly. She does not serve rare burgers or undercooked chicken. Everything gets cooked until it is done, by which she means fully cooked, no pink remaining, hot all the way through. The thawing method may be questionable, but the cooking method is sound. There is also the fact that frozen meat from 1975 comes from a different supply chain than meat today. Smaller processing plants, more local distribution, less opportunity for mass contamination. The meat is not necessarily safer, but the scale is smaller. A problem at one plant does not affect the entire country. Still, by modern standards, this is food safety recklessness. Leaving meat on the counter to thaw is exactly the kind of practice that public health campaigns spend millions of dollars trying to eliminate. And yet it was normal, standard, unremarkable. The meat thawed, the dinner got made, and life continued without incident. Another small mystery of the 1970s kitchen that worked despite all the reasons it should not have. Your neighbor keeps chickens in the backyard. She brings over a carton of eggs every Saturday morning, still warm from the nest, sometimes with a feather stuck to the shell or a bit of straw caught in the cardboard. You put them in a bowl on the counter, not in the refrigerator. The bowl sits there for a week, sometimes longer. You use the eggs as you need them. They are fine. They have always been fine. The idea of refrigerating fresh eggs does not occur to anyone. The eggs sit in a ceramic bowl near the stove. Your mother reaches for one when she makes scrambled eggs for breakfast. She cracks it into the pan, and the yolk is bright yellow, the white thick and clear. The egg is perfect. It has been sitting at room temperature for 4 days, and it is perfect. She uses 2 more for a cake on Wednesday. Those eggs have been on the counter for 6 days. The cake rises beautifully. This is normal for fresh eggs in 1976. If they come from a neighbor's chickens, or from a local farm, or even from certain grocery stores that sell unwashed eggs, they stay on the counter. Room temperature. Available. Convenient. Nobody dies from this. Nobody even gets sick. The science behind this is interesting, though nobody in your neighborhood knows it. When a chicken lays an egg, the egg is coated in a natural protective layer called the bloom or cuticle. This coating seals the porous shell and prevents bacteria from entering the egg. As long as the bloom remains intact, the egg can sit at room temperature for weeks without refrigeration. It is a self-contained system. The chicken designed it that way. American commercial egg production, however, takes a different approach. Eggs are washed before they reach the grocery store. This removes dirt and potential contaminants from the shell, but it also removes the bloom. Once the bloom is gone, the egg becomes porous and vulnerable. Bacteria can enter through the shell. At that point, refrigeration becomes necessary. To slow bacterial growth, this is why American grocery store eggs are refrigerated and European eggs are not. Different processing, different requirements. But your neighbor's eggs are not washed. They come straight from the coop to the carton, to your kitchen. The bloom is intact. The eggs are protected. They sit on your counter the same way they would sit in a European kitchen, unrefrigerated and perfectly safe. Your mother does not know the word bloom. She does not know the science. She just knows that fresh eggs keep well on the counter and store-bought eggs go in the refrigerator. This is learned behavior passed down without explanation. It works, so you do it. There is something pleasant about eggs on the counter. They are visible, accessible. You can see at a glance how many you have left. When you need an egg, you do not have to open the refrigerator and dig around. You just reach into the bowl. The eggs are room temperature, which some bakers prefer because room temperature eggs mix more easily into batters and doughs. The whites whip up better. The yolks blend more smoothly. Cold eggs straight from the refrigerator can cause butter to harden or mixtures to seize. Room temperature eggs cooperate. By the time you are an adult shopping at modern grocery stores, all the eggs are refrigerated. You buy them cold and keep them cold because that is what the cartons say to do. You never leave eggs on the counter because you have been taught that eggs belong in the refrigerator. The memory of your neighbor's eggs sitting in a bowl on your mother's counter feels strange, like something that should not have worked but did. If you tried to explain this to someone today, someone who only knows grocery store eggs, they would be horrified. Eggs at room temperature for a week? That is food poisoning waiting to happen. But it was not. It was just eggs. Fresh eggs. Unprocessed eggs. Eggs that still had their natural protection intact. Another quiet example of the 1970s kitchen operating by rules that modern food culture has mostly forgotten. Dinner is over. There is half a pot of stew left, still warm in the Dutch oven on the stove. Your mother turns off the burner and leaves the pot where it is. Not in the refrigerator. Not even covered, necessarily. It sits on the stove, cooling slowly through the evening. By morning, it has reached room temperature. Then, and only then, does it go into the refrigerator. This is how you handle leftovers. Slowly, patiently, without rushing the process. The reasoning, if anyone bothers to articulate it, is that you should not put hot food directly into the refrigerator. Hot food will raise the temperature inside the refrigerator, which could affect everything else stored in there. Better to let it cool first. So the pot sits on the stove for hours. 3 hours, 5 hours, sometimes overnight. The stew cools gradually, moving through the danger zone at a leisurely pace while bacteria, theoretically, multiply happily in the warm environment. Your mother does this with everything. Soup, chili, spaghetti sauce, pot roast. If it was cooked in a pot and there are leftovers, the pot stays on the stove until the food is cool. She might put a lid on it if she remembers, but often she does not. The food just sits there, exposed to the air, cooling in its own time. Modern food safety guidelines are extremely clear on this point. Hot food should be refrigerated within 2 hours, not left to cool slowly on the stove, not left out overnight. The danger zone, that temperature range between 40 and 140 degrees where bacteria thrive, should be crossed as quickly as possible. Leaving food to cool on the stove means the food spends hours in the danger zone, creating ideal conditions for bacterial growth. The modern solution is to divide large quantities of hot food into smaller, shallow containers so they cool more quickly in the refrigerator, or to use an ice bath to bring the temperature down rapidly before refrigerating, or to simply accept that modern refrigerators are designed to handle a bit of heat and can compensate for one warm container without endangering the rest of the food inside. But your mother's refrigerator in 1976 is not designed for this. It is smaller, less efficient, slower to recover from temperature changes. And the idea of dividing leftovers into multiple containers feels wasteful and unnecessary. Why dirty more dishes? The pot has a lid. Just leave it on the stove. So the stew sits. The house is quiet. The stew cools. In the morning, your mother tests it with her hand. If the pot is cool to the touch, the stew goes in the refrigerator. If it still feels slightly warm, she leaves it a bit longer. Temperature is measured by feel, not with a thermometer. When it seems right, it goes in, and then, a day or two later, the stew is reheated and served again. It tastes fine. It smells fine. Nobody gets sick. The slow cooling on the stove, which should theoretically be a food safety disaster, produces no observable consequences. Your family eats leftover stew once or twice a week all through winter, and everyone is fine. There are a few possible reasons this works despite the risk. One is that thorough reheating kills most bacteria. The stew goes back on the stove and gets heated until it is bubbling. That high temperature destroys anything that might have grown during the cooling period. Another is that certain foods are more resistant to bacterial growth than others. Acidic foods, salty foods, and foods cooked at high temperatures for long periods develop some level of natural preservation. Stew that has been simmering for hours may simply be more stable than a casserole or a stir-fry. But the main reason, probably, is luck. Luck and repetition. Your mother does this hundreds of times over the years. Most of those times, nothing goes wrong. The few times something might go slightly off, it is subtle enough that reheating fixes it. The practice becomes self-reinforcing. It works, so you keep doing it. It keeps working, so you never question it. By the time food safety education reaches the mainstream, your mother has been cooling leftovers on the stove for 30 years. Changing the habit feels unnecessary. She knows what she is doing. She has always done it this way. The guidelines are for other people. People who do not know how to cook. People who need rules because they lack instinct. She has instinct, and her instinct says the stew is fine. The sponge sits in a small ceramic dish beside the sink. It is yellow, or it was yellow once. Now it is more of a gray-beige with dark spots and a texture that is no longer quite sponge-like. It has been there for 3 weeks. You use it to wipe counters, wash dishes, clean the sink itself. When it starts to smell, you rinse it out under hot water and squeeze it hard. It goes back in the dish. Nobody replaces sponges on a schedule. You use them until they fall apart. The sponge handles everything. Your mother wipes down the counter after preparing raw chicken. She washes the breakfast dishes. She scrubs a pot that had spaghetti sauce stuck to the bottom. She wipes the table after dinner. All with the same sponge. The sponge picks up bacteria from the raw chicken, food particles from the dishes, grease from the pot, crumbs from the table. It becomes a dense ecosystem of everything that has passed through the kitchen in the last 3 weeks. If you squeeze the sponge under hot water, it releases a smell. Not quite rotten, but organic. Damp, alive. Your mother squeezes it thoroughly, wrings out as much water as possible, and sets it back in its dish. The smell dissipates. The sponge dries somewhat. By evening, it is ready to use again. Modern food safety experts describe sponges as the most bacteria-laden item in the kitchen. Studies have found that kitchen sponges can harbor billions of bacteria per square inch, including potentially harmful strains like E. coli, Salmonella, and Campylobacter. The warm, moist environment of a used sponge is ideal for bacterial growth. Every time you wipe a counter with that sponge, you are potentially spreading bacteria rather than cleaning. The modern recommendation is to replace sponges frequently. Once a week, ideally. Every 2 weeks at most. Or to sanitize them daily by microwaving them while damp for 2 minutes, or running them through the dishwasher. The idea of using the same sponge for 3 weeks or more is considered genuinely hazardous. But your mother does not know this, and if she did, she might not care. The sponge works. It cleans. Dishes come out clean. Counters look clean. Nobody is getting sick from the sponge. The idea of replacing a perfectly functional sponge just because some researcher says it has bacteria feels wasteful. Everything has bacteria. Your hands have bacteria. The air has bacteria. You cannot live in a sterile environment. You just clean things and move on. There is also an economic element. Sponges cost money. Not much, but in a household where every dollar is considered, throwing away a sponge that still has material integrity feels frivolous. The sponge still scrubs. It still holds water and soap. It still does the job it was purchased to do. Replacing it just because it has been a few weeks makes no practical sense. The truth is that most of the bacteria in a kitchen sponge are harmless. They are environmental bacteria, the same kind that exist on every surface in your home. The dangerous bacteria, the pathogens that actually make people sick, are less common. And even when they are present, the risk of infection depends on many factors. How much bacteria, what kind, where it gets transferred, whether it reaches someone's mouth, whether their immune system can handle it. The sponge is gross in theory, but in practice, it is rarely the direct cause of illness. Still, if you were to look at a culture plate showing what grows from a 3-week-old kitchen sponge, you would probably never want to touch a sponge again. The sheer quantity and variety of bacterial colonies would be alarming. But nobody in 1976 is culturing their sponges. They are just using them. And most of the time, this works out fine. When the sponge finally falls apart, when pieces start coming off in your hand, or the texture becomes too degraded to hold together, then your mother throws it away. She gets a new sponge from under the sink. The new sponge is bright yellow and rough-textured and satisfying to use. It will last another month, maybe 6 weeks if it is sturdy. And then the cycle will repeat. This is simply how sponges work in a kitchen. They are used hard for a long time until they no longer function. Then they are replaced. No schedule, no timer, just function and common sense. The cast iron skillet sits on the stove, always. After cooking, your mother wipes it out with a paper towel while it is still warm. Sometimes she rinses it quickly, under hot water if something is stuck. But even then she does not use soap. She never uses soap. Never. Soap, she says, will ruin the seasoning. The skillet gets wiped, dried immediately with a towel, and set back on the stove. It is used again the next day. This is not neglect. This is care. The skillet is heavy, black, smooth from years of use. It belonged to your grandmother before it belonged to your mother. It will probably belong to you someday. The surface is slick with built-up oil layers that have polymerized over time into a natural nonstick coating. This is the seasoning. It took years to develop, and it must be protected. Your mother cooks everything in this skillet. Eggs in the morning, fried chicken for Sunday dinner, cornbread, hamburgers, sautéed vegetables. The skillet goes from raw meat to eggs to vegetables without a thorough washing in between. Just a wipe. Just a rinse. The idea is that the high heat of cooking sterilizes the pan. Fire cleans, oil protects. The seasoning does the work. Modern food safety guidelines are uncomfortable with this practice. Cooking surfaces that touch raw meat should be washed with hot soapy water to remove bacteria. A wipe with a paper towel does not qualify as adequate cleaning. The risk of cross-contamination is real. Bacteria from raw chicken can survive a simple wipe and transfer to the next food cooked in that pan. But cast iron enthusiasts argue that the high heat of cast iron cooking kills bacteria. The pan gets screaming hot. Hot enough to sear meat. Hot enough to make oil shimmer and smoke. That heat, they say, is more effective than soap. And soap, they insist, will strip the seasoning and ruin the pan. The truth is somewhere in the middle. Modern dish soap is not as harsh as the lye-based soaps of the past. A small amount of soap will not instantly destroy seasoning that has been built up over years. Many cast iron users today do use a small amount of soap when necessary, and their pans survive just fine. But the cultural belief that soap ruins cast iron remains strong, passed down from a time when soap really was harsher. Your mother wipes the skillet after every use. If there are stuck-on bits, she uses coarse salt as an abrasive, scrubbing with a paper towel or a cloth until the stuck bits come loose. Then she rinses with hot water, wipes dry, and sometimes rubs a thin layer of oil across the surface before putting it back on the stove. The skillet never sees soap, never sees a sponge, never sits wet in a dish rack. It is cared for according to rules that were established long before your mother was born. And the skillet performs beautifully. Eggs slide out without sticking. Cornbread releases cleanly. Fried chicken develops a perfect crust. The skillet has better nonstick properties than most modern nonstick pans, and it will last forever, while those pans get thrown away after a few years when the coating wears off. There is something satisfying about the cast iron routine, the simplicity of it. Wipe, dry, done. No scrubbing with soap. No waiting for it to dry. No careful handling to avoid scratching a delicate surface. The skillet is indestructible. You can cook on high heat. You can scrape with metal utensils. You can bang it around. It gets better with use, not worse. If you suggested to your mother that she should wash the skillet with soap after cooking raw chicken, she would look at you like you had suggested she throw it in the trash. The skillet has been in the family for 40 years. It has never been washed with soap. It has never made anyone sick. Why would you start now? The cast iron skillet represents a kind of kitchen wisdom that predates modern food safety science. It comes from a time when people trusted heat and oil and experienced more than they trusted laboratory studies about bacterial contamination. And for the most part, that trust was well placed. The skillet worked. It still works. Generations of cooks have used cast iron this way, and generations of families have eaten food cooked in those pans without incident. The method is old, questionable by modern standards, and stubbornly effective. Breakfast is a production in 1974. Your mother sets the table before anyone sits down. Cereal boxes lined up, bowls stacked, spoons fanned out, sugar bowl in the center, and the milk. The milk comes out of the refrigerator and sits on the table in its waxy cardboard carton. It stays there through the whole meal. 20 minutes, sometimes 30 if your father is reading the newspaper. Nobody rushes to put it back. Nobody worries it will spoil. When breakfast is over, the milk goes back into the refrigerator, barely cooler than when it came out. The carton sits there sweating slightly, small beads of condensation forming on the outside. The milk inside is warming up. Not dramatically, but noticeably. If you poured a glass at the beginning of breakfast and another at the end, you could feel the difference. The first glass is cold. The last glass is cool. Still drinkable. Still fine. Just not refrigerator cold anymore. Your father uses the milk for his coffee. Your siblings use it for cereal. Your mother pours a small glass for the youngest child. The carton gets picked up and set down half a dozen times. It sits in a shaft of morning sunlight coming through the window. The kitchen is warm, from the stove where your mother is frying eggs. The milk sits through all of this, unhurried, unconcerned. Modern food safety guidelines are very specific about milk. Milk is a perishable dairy product. It must be kept refrigerated at all times except for the brief moment when you pour it. Leaving milk out at room temperature allows bacteria to multiply. After 2 hours, milk that has been left out should be discarded. After 4 hours, it is definitely unsafe. But your mother is not leaving milk out for 4 hours. Just 30 minutes, maybe 45 if breakfast runs long. And this happens every single day. 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year. The milk comes out, sits through breakfast, goes back in. Nobody tracks the time. Nobody worries. The milk tastes fine when it goes back in the refrigerator, and it tastes fine the next morning when it comes out again. Part of the reason this works is that milk in 1974 is pasteurized. Pasteurization kills most of the harmful bacteria in milk. Not all bacteria, but the dangerous ones. What remains are bacteria that will eventually cause the milk to sour. But those bacteria work slowly, especially if the milk is kept mostly cold. A brief period at room temperature during breakfast is not enough to cause rapid spoilage. The milk is also being used quickly. A gallon of milk in a family of 5 lasts 3 or 4 days. The milk is not sitting in the refrigerator for weeks, slowly accumulating bacteria. It is being consumed at a steady rate. Even if breakfast leaves the milk slightly warmer than ideal, the milk is gone before that warmth has time to cause real problems. There is also the smell test. If milk is going bad, you can smell it. If milk has gone bad, you can taste it immediately. The first sip of spoiled milk is unmistakable. Your mother relies on this. She does not check dates. She does not calculate hours out of refrigeration. She smells the milk. If it smells fine, it is fine. This method has worked for her entire adult life. Still, modern food scientists would not recommend this practice. Even if the milk seems fine, bacteria are growing during that time on the table. The milk shelf life is being shortened. The risk of illness is increasing, even if the increase is small. The safe practice is to minimize time out of refrigeration. Pour what you need and put the carton back immediately. But that is not how breakfast works in 1974. Breakfast is a communal event. Everyone sits down together. The food is on the table. The milk is on the table. You pass things back and forth. You take your time. Breakfast is not a race to get the milk back in the refrigerator before some invisible timer runs out. Breakfast is a meal, and the milk is part of the meal. And it sits on the table until the meal is over. When breakfast ends, your mother clears the table. Dishes to the sink, cereal boxes back in the cupboard, milk back in the refrigerator. The milk has been out for 35 minutes. It is noticeably warmer than it was. But it will cool down again. By tomorrow morning, it will be cold again, ready for another round. This cycle repeats every day without incident. The milk never spoils on the table. It always makes it back to the refrigerator in time. And everyone drinks their morning milk without worry or consequence. There is a dish towel hanging from the oven door handle. It has been there since morning. Your mother uses it to dry her hands after washing vegetables. She uses it to wipe the counter. She uses it to grab a hot pot handle. She uses it to dry a dish. It is damp from all of this, but it stays on the handle. It will stay there all day, through multiple uses, through dampness and drying and dampness again. At night, she might hang it over the faucet to dry fully, or she might not. Tomorrow, it starts again. The towel is cotton, printed with a cheerful pattern that has faded from years of washing. It hangs from the oven door handle because that is where dish towels go. Always within reach. Always available. Your mother uses it constantly. She wipes her hands, wipes the counter, picks up a hot lid, wipes her hands again. Each time the towel gets a little damper, a little more saturated with whatever it has just touched. By afternoon, the towel has absorbed water from washed vegetables, grease from the counter where she set down a spatula, moisture from her hands, condensation from a pot lid. It is not dripping wet, but it is definitely damp. You can feel the dampness when you touch it. The towel is cool and slightly heavy with absorbed liquid. It smells faintly of whatever has been cooked that day. Onions, maybe. Dish soap. Something indefinable that is just kitchen. Modern food safety experts would be appalled. A damp kitchen towel is a bacterial breeding ground. Every time your mother uses that towel to dry her hands after handling raw chicken, she is transferring bacteria to the towel. Every time she wipes the counter where raw chicken sat, more bacteria. The towel stays damp, which keeps the bacteria alive and happy. Then she uses that same towel to dry a clean dish, transferring the bacteria from the towel to the dish. Cross-contamination, happening over and over all day long. The modern recommendation is to use paper towels for anything involving raw meat. To wash kitchen towels daily, or even more frequently if they have touched anything risky. To never use the same towel for drying hands and drying dishes. To replace damp towels with dry ones. To treat kitchen towels as potential vectors of illness and manage them accordingly. But your mother has one dish towel hanging on the oven door. That is the towel. That is the only towel in active use. There are other towels in the drawer, but they are backups. The primary towel stays on the oven door handle all day, all week, until it gets too dirty to ignore. Then it goes in the laundry, and a new towel takes its place. This might happen once a week, maybe twice if there has been a lot of cooking. The towel does not smell bad. It just smells like kitchen. Your mother rinses it out under hot water occasionally if it seems particularly dirty, wrings it out, and hangs it back up. The towel dries partially between uses. Never completely, but enough that it is not soaking wet. Just damp. Always slightly damp. And yet, nobody gets sick. The dishes dried with that towel are eaten from without incident. The hands dried with that towel touch food that gets eaten without incident. The counter wiped with that towel is used to prepare more food without incident. The damp dish towel, which should theoretically be a bacterial nightmare, causes no observable problems. Part of the explanation might be that most bacteria need more than a damp towel to actually make someone sick. They need to get into food, survive cooking, get eaten, survive stomach acid, and then multiply in the intestines. That is a lot of steps. A few bacteria on a dish that then gets used for hot food that then gets cooked is probably not enough to cause illness. The bacteria die somewhere along the way. There is also the fact that people have immune systems. Exposure to small amounts of bacteria is normal and usually harmless. Your immune system handles it. Only when the bacterial load is high, or the bacteria is particularly virulent, or your immune system is compromised, do you actually get sick. Most of the time, the bacteria from the damp dish towel are just background noise. But try explaining this to someone today. Try telling a modern home cook that your mother used the same damp towel all day for everything and never washed it and nobody got sick. They would not believe you. Or they would believe you but be horrified. The damp dish towel has become a symbol of everything wrong with old-fashioned kitchen practices. Unhygienic, risky, gross. And maybe it was a little gross. Maybe the towel really was harboring more bacteria than it should have. But it worked. It was functional. It was simple. One towel, one handle, one day. Your mother knew where the towel was at all times. She never had to think about it. And the towel, damp and overused and slightly questionable, did its job without causing any harm worth noticing. Your mother is making spaghetti sauce. She stirs with a long wooden spoon, the same one she has used for years. The handle is smooth from use, the wood darkened with oil and tomato stains that no amount of washing will remove. She lifts the spoon to her mouth, tastes, considers. Needs more salt. She adds salt, stirs, tastes again from the same spoon. Then the spoon goes back into the sauce, stirring, cooking. This happens 3 or 4 times before the sauce is done. Nobody thinks about backwash or bacteria or double dipping. The spoon is the spoon. Tasting is part of cooking. She does this with everything. Soup, gravy, chili, stew. Anything that simmers in a pot gets tasted repeatedly during cooking. The wooden spoon goes from pot to pot again. Your mother's saliva, small amounts of it, mixes into the sauce. Then the sauce continues cooking. The heat, she assumes, kills anything that might be questionable. The sauce tastes right. That is what matters. If you are in the kitchen watching, she might offer you a taste too. She lifts the spoon, blows on it to cool it slightly, and holds it out. You taste. The spoon goes back into the pot. This is normal. This is how you learn to cook, by tasting, by adjusting, by understanding how flavors develop over time. The spoon is the tool that makes this possible. Modern food safety guidelines discourage this practice. Tasting food and returning the same spoon to the pot is considered cross-contamination. Bacteria from your mouth can survive on the spoon and transfer back into the food. If the food is not cooked thoroughly after that final taste, those bacteria could potentially survive and make someone sick. The recommended practice is to use a clean spoon for each taste, or to pour a small amount into a separate bowl for tasting. But your mother does not have a lineup of clean spoons ready for tasting. She has one wooden spoon and she is using it to cook. Stopping to wash the spoon or get a new one every time she wants to taste would slow everything down. The sauce needs constant attention. The spoon stays in her hand. Tasting is quick, efficient, continuous. The sauce gets better with each adjustment. The risk, in practical terms, is probably low. The sauce is hot. Most bacteria cannot survive prolonged exposure to heat, especially the simmering heat of a pot of sauce. If your mother tastes the sauce and then it continues to simmer for another 20 minutes, any bacteria from her mouth are likely dead. The spoon itself, Wooden and porous as it is, stays in the hot sauce most of the time. The heat is constantly sterilizing it. There is also the fact that the sauce is acidic. Tomatoes are acidic. Acid inhibits bacterial growth. A pot of tomato sauce is not an ideal environment for bacteria, even without the heat. The combination of heat and acidity makes the sauce fairly hostile to microbial life. A small amount of saliva from tasting is unlikely to change that. Still, the wooden spoon itself is a bit of a concern. Wood is porous. It absorbs liquids and can harbor bacteria in the tiny cracks and crevices of the wood grain. A wooden spoon that gets tasted from repeatedly and never fully dries between uses could theoretically develop a bacterial colony. But your mother washes the wooden spoon with hot water and dish soap after cooking. She sets it in the dish rack to dry. By the next time she uses it, it is clean and dry. This seems to be enough. The wooden spoon has been in use for years. It is stained and worn, but still functional. Your mother prefers it to metal spoons, because wood does not conduct heat and the spoon never gets too hot to hold. She prefers it to plastic spoons because wood feels right in her hand and does not melt if she accidentally leaves it resting on the edge of a hot pot. The wooden spoon is the right tool for the job, and tasting from it is part of using it properly. If you suggested she use a separate spoon for tasting, she would find it fussy and unnecessary. Cooking is intuitive. You taste as you go. You adjust. You make it right. Having to stop and get a clean spoon every time interrupts the flow. The sauce is ready when it tastes ready, and the only way to know is to taste it. The wooden spoon makes that possible. Quick, easy, continuous feedback. That is how good cooking happens. And the sauce is always good. Your mother's spaghetti sauce is the sauce you measure all other spaghetti sauces against for the rest of your life. Rich, balanced, perfect. Made with a wooden spoon that went from pot to mouth and back again half a dozen times. Tasted into perfection, adjusted with salt and pepper and maybe a pinch of sugar until it was exactly right. The method was questionable. The result was flawless. And nobody in all the years your mother made that sauce ever got sick from it. Your mother makes egg salad on Saturday morning. She mixes hard-boiled eggs with mayonnaise from the jar, adds a little mustard, some salt. She makes sandwiches for everyone and puts them on plates on the table. Lunch is not for another hour. The sandwiches sit there, unrefrigerated, mayonnaise and all. By the time you eat, they have been at room temperature for 90 minutes. They taste fine. They are fine. Nobody has ever gotten sick from Saturday egg salad. The sandwiches sit on the kitchen table in full view. White bread, slightly soft, from the moisture of the egg salad, edges curling up just a bit. The mayonnaise in the egg salad is warming slowly from refrigerator temperature to room temperature, to slightly warmer than room temperature as the morning progresses and the kitchen heats up from bodies moving through. From the sun through the window, from the ambient warmth of a house in summer. Your mother makes the sandwiches early because she is getting other things ready. Potato chips in a bowl, pickles on a plate, lemonade mixed in a pitcher. When lunch is ready, lunch is ready. Everyone will sit down at the same time and eat together. The sandwiches waiting on the table are part of the preparation. They are not a food safety risk in anyone's mind. They are just lunch. There is a deep cultural fear of mayonnaise that will develop later in the 80s and 90s as food poisoning stories circulate and warnings multiply. Mayonnaise left out at picnics. Mayonnaise in potato salad at church potlucks. Mayonnaise blamed for every summer stomach illness. The warnings become so pervasive that people start to believe mayonnaise itself is dangerous, that it spoils instantly at room temperature, that it is a bacterial breeding ground waiting to poison anyone foolish enough to leave it unrefrigerated. But the truth is more complicated. Commercial mayonnaise is acidic. The vinegar and lemon juice in mayonnaise create an environment that inhibits bacterial growth. Mayonnaise straight from the jar is actually fairly stable at room temperature for short periods. What makes mayonnaise-based dishes risky is not the mayonnaise itself, but what gets mixed into it. Eggs, potatoes, chicken, tuna. These are protein-rich foods that bacteria love. When you mix them with mayonnaise and leave them out, the bacteria grow in the eggs, or potatoes or chicken, not in the mayonnaise. The mayonnaise just happens to be there. Your mother's egg salad contains hard-boiled eggs. The eggs were cooked thoroughly, boiled for 10 minutes until the yolks were completely firm and dry. Then they were peeled and chopped while still slightly warm, mixed with mayonnaise, mustard, salt. The mixture is not sterile, but it is relatively low risk if it is not left out for too long. 90 minutes is longer than modern guidelines would recommend, but it is not long enough for catastrophic bacterial growth, especially if the kitchen is not excessively hot. The sandwiches taste good. The bread is soft. The egg salad is creamy and well-seasoned. You eat 2 sandwiches. Your siblings eat theirs. Your father eats his while reading the newspaper. Nobody complains of a stomach ache later. Nobody spends the afternoon sick. The Saturday egg salad sandwiches are a regular occurrence, and they are always fine. There is something generous about food sitting on the table waiting for you. It signals that the meal is ready, that someone has thought ahead, that lunch will happen when everyone gathers. The sandwiches are not rushed from refrigerator to mouth with obsessive concern about time and temperature. They are made, they wait, they are eaten. This feels human and normal and right. Modern food safety would require the sandwiches to stay refrigerated until the moment of serving. Make them, cover them, put them in the refrigerator, take them out when everyone sits down. This preserves safety, but loses something in the process. The visual of lunch already on the table, the readiness, the ease, the sense that food does not have to be micromanaged to be safe. Your mother's egg salad sits out for 90 minutes and nothing bad happens. This happens every Saturday for years. The mayonnaise does not spoil. The eggs do not poison anyone. The sandwiches are simply there, waiting, like lunch should be. Another small example of the 1970s kitchen operating on instinct and experience rather than precise temperature control. The instinct said the sandwiches would be fine. The experience confirmed it. And so, the practice continued, unquestioned and unremarkable, part of the ordinary rhythm of Saturday lunch. Sunday dinner produces a large quantity of browned ground beef. Your mother drains the grease and lets the meat cool in the pan. Then she puts it in a container, covers it with a lid or aluminum foil, and stores it in the refrigerator. Not for a day or two, for a week. She uses it in tacos on Tuesday, in sloppy joes on Thursday, in chili on Saturday. The beef lasts. It always lasts. The idea that ground beef should be used within 3 days is not a rule anyone follows. The beef sits in the refrigerator in a Tupperware container or a bowl covered with foil. Your mother scoops out what she needs for each meal. Tuesday, she takes half for tacos. Thursday, she takes another portion for sloppy joes. By Saturday, when she makes chili, she is scraping the last bits from the container. The beef has been cooked once, refrigerated, reheated multiple times. Each time it comes out of the refrigerator, it sits at room temperature for a few minutes while your mother gets the rest of the ingredients ready. Then it gets heated in a pan until it is hot again. This is meal planning before meal planning is a concept with a name. Your mother browns a large amount of beef on Sunday because browning beef is time-consuming and it makes sense to do it once. The browned beef becomes the base for multiple meals through the week. It saves time. It saves effort. It makes weeknight cooking faster. The beef is already cooked. You just add it to whatever else you are making. Modern food safety guidelines are clear about cooked ground beef. Use it within 3 to 4 days. After that, the risk of bacterial growth increases. Even when refrigerated, bacteria can slowly multiply in cooked meat. The longer it sits, the higher the risk. Reheating kills some bacteria, but not all, and certain bacteria produce toxins that remain even after the bacteria themselves are dead. A week is too long, but your mother's ground beef lasts a week without causing problems. The beef was cooked thoroughly on Sunday, browned until no pink remained, drained of grease, cooled and refrigerated within an hour or two. The refrigerator is cold, not as cold as modern refrigerators, but cold enough. The beef sits undisturbed for most of the week, getting opened briefly for each meal and then sealed again. When your mother reheats the beef, she heats it thoroughly. The beef gets stirred in a hot pan until it is steaming. This probably kills most of the bacteria that might have started growing during refrigeration. Not all bacteria, not bacterial toxins, but enough that the risk is reduced. The beef gets eaten right away while hot. It does not sit around after reheating. There is also the fact that ground beef in 1976 comes from a different supply chain. Smaller meat processing plants, more local distribution, beef that was slaughtered, ground, and sold within a shorter time frame. The meat is not traveling across the country. It is not sitting in distribution centers for weeks. It is fresher to start with, which might give it a bit more staying power in the refrigerator. Still, a week is a long time, longer than any modern food safety expert would recommend. But the beef does not smell bad. Your mother checks it each time before using it. If it smelled off, she would throw it out. But it never smells off. It just smells like cooked ground beef. A bit of refrigerator smell, maybe, but nothing alarming. She heats it up and it tastes fine. The practice is efficient. One large batch of browned beef, 5 or 6 pounds, becomes the foundation for 3 or 4 meals. Less time at the stove, fewer dishes, more flexibility during the week. If your mother is tired on Thursday and does not feel like cooking, she can make sloppy joes in 10 minutes using the pre-browned beef. The beef waits in the refrigerator, ready, available, stretched across the week. This would not be possible with modern guidelines. 3 to 4 days means the beef would run out by Wednesday or Thursday. Your mother would have to brown a new batch midweek, or plan differently, or use something else. The week-long stretch of one batch of beef makes a certain kind of household management possible. It is not just about the beef. It is about time and labor and the logistics of feeding a family. When you eventually learn that cooked ground beef should only be kept for 3 to 4 days, it feels restrictive. Your mother kept beef for a week, for decades. Nobody got sick. Why the shorter timeline? The answer is risk reduction. Modern food safety is about minimizing risk, not eliminating only the catastrophic dangers. Keeping beef for a week carries more risk than keeping it for 3 days. Not necessarily a high risk, but a higher risk. And the goal is to reduce risk as much as possible. But your mother was not trying to minimize risk. She was trying to feed a family efficiently. The beef worked. It lasted. It tasted fine. And so it stayed in the refrigerator for a week, reliable and useful. Part of the meal rotation that kept weeknight dinners manageable. Another practice that worked in defiance of rules that did not yet exist. The cutting board is wood. Thick, heavy, scarred from years of use. Your mother cuts raw chicken on it. She wipes it with a damp cloth. She cuts vegetables on it an hour later. She never sanitizes it with bleach. She never runs it through a dishwasher because nobody has a dishwasher. She just wipes it and keeps going. The board is seasoned with use, dark in places, lighter in others. It will last another 20 years. The board sits on the counter most of the time. It is too big to store in a drawer and too useful to put away. Your mother pulls it toward her when she needs to chop something. Onions, carrots, potatoes, chicken, steak. Everything gets cut on the same board. The board accumulates knife marks, deep grooves that run the length of the wood. These grooves trap food particles and moisture. They are impossible to clean completely. You can wipe the board, but you cannot reach into the grooves. The board develops a history written in cut marks. After cutting raw chicken, your mother rinses the board under hot water. Sometimes she uses a little dish soap and scrubs with a cloth. Then she rinses again and wipes it dry with a towel. The board looks clean. It smells like chicken faintly, but it looks clean. Within the hour, she is chopping lettuce on the same board for a salad. The lettuce will be eaten raw. The chicken will be cooked. Nobody considers the sequence of events to be a problem. Modern food safety experts specifically warn against wooden cutting boards for raw meat. Wood is porous. It absorbs liquids, including liquids from raw meat that contain bacteria. Those bacteria can survive in the wood even after washing. When you cut vegetables on the same board later, bacteria can transfer from the wood to the vegetables. If the vegetables are eaten raw, the bacteria go directly into someone's mouth. This is textbook cross-contamination. The modern recommendation is to use separate cutting boards for raw meat and fresh produce. Color-coded boards, ideally. A red board for meat, a green board for vegetables. Or to use plastic boards that can go in the dishwasher and be sanitized at high heat. Plastic is non-porous. It does not absorb liquids. It can be truly cleaned. Wood cannot. But your mother has one cutting board, one large wooden cutting board that does everything. Replacing it with multiple plastic boards would cost money and take up space. The wooden board works. It has always worked. She has used it this way for 20 years, and nobody has gotten sick from the cutting board. There is research decades later that suggests wooden cutting boards might actually be safer than assumed. Wood has natural antimicrobial properties. Bacteria that get into the wood grain often die rather than multiply. The surface of a wooden board, when properly maintained, may actually be more hostile to bacteria than a plastic board covered in knife scars. But nobody in 1976 knows this research because it does not exist yet. Your mother just knows the wooden board works. She also trusts cooking. The chicken gets cooked. High heat kills bacteria. If there are bacteria on the board and they transfer to the chicken, the cooking process destroys them. The vegetables are different. They are eaten raw. But your mother washes the vegetables. A quick rinse under cold water. That, in her mind, takes care of any concerns. The vegetables are clean. The board is clean. Everything is fine. The board gets washed after each use, but the washing is not rigorous. Hot water, a bit of soap, a wipe with a cloth. No scrubbing with a brush to get into the grooves. No sanitizing solution. No bleach. Just a basic cleaning that removes visible food and makes the board look ready for the next use. This is sufficient in your mother's judgment. The board dries between uses. It does not stay damp. Damp wood would mold. The board stays dry and functional. There is something permanent about the wooden cutting board. It is a tool that will outlast trends and recommendations and health scares. Your mother's cutting board came from her mother. Someday, it might go to you. The knife marks are a record of every meal prepared on it. Every chicken, every onion, every carrot. The board is part of the kitchen in a way that a plastic cutting board never could be. It has weight and presence and history. When you eventually move out and set up your own kitchen, you might buy a plastic cutting board because that is what the stores sell and what everyone says is safer. But it will not feel the same. It will be lightweight and slippery and impermanent. You will replace it every few years when the knife marks get too deep. You will never develop the same relationship with it that your mother had with the wooden board. The wooden board was a tool you trusted. The plastic board is just equipment. It is the 4th of July, and your family is having a picnic. The potato salad comes out of the refrigerator at noon, assembled this morning by your mother after boiling the potatoes last night. It sits on the picnic table in a big bowl covered with plastic wrap. The temperature is 87 degrees. The potato salad sits there for 4 hours. People eat from it all afternoon, first at lunchtime, then again mid-afternoon when someone wants a snack. Then at dinner when the hot dogs are ready. Nobody gets sick. The mayonnaise does not turn. The potatoes do not spoil. This is simply what happens at summer picnics. Food sits out. People eat. Life continues. The picnic table is in the backyard under a tree that provides some shade, but not complete coverage. The sun moves through the afternoon, and the bowl of potato salad moves in and out of direct sunlight. Your mother adjusts the plastic wrap occasionally, smoothing it back down when someone lifts it to serve themselves. The bowl is ceramic, heavy, the kind that retains temperature. It started out cold from the refrigerator, but it warmed steadily through the afternoon. By mid-afternoon, the potato salad is no longer cold. It is not hot, but it is definitely not cold. Room temperature, maybe warmer. The mayonnaise has softened. The potatoes have released some of their starch, making the mixture slightly looser, slightly wetter. The potato salad still tastes good. It tastes like summer. Like picnics, like the 4th of July. This scene is repeated at every summer gathering in 1976. Church picnics, family reunions, neighborhood cookouts. Potato salad on the table for hours. Potato salad in the sun. Potato salad that started cold and ended lukewarm. And everyone eats it without worry. This is normal. This is what potato salad does at picnics. Modern food safety guidelines are emphatic about mayonnaise-based salads in summer heat. Keep them cold. Keep them on ice. Do not let them sit at room temperature for more than 2 hours, and in hot weather, not more than 1 hour. After that, throw them away. The combination of mayonnaise, potatoes, and warmth creates ideal conditions for bacterial growth. Potato salad left out for 4 hours in 87-degree heat is a food poisoning disaster waiting to happen. But your mother's potato salad does not cause food poisoning. Not this time, not the next time, not any of the dozens of times she makes potato salad for summer gatherings. People eat it all afternoon and everyone is fine. No stomach aches, no vomiting, no trips to the bathroom with regret. The potato salad sits out in defiance of every modern guideline, and nothing happens. Part of the explanation might be the ingredients. Your mother uses real mayonnaise, acidic and preservative-laden. She adds vinegar to the potato salad for flavor, which lowers the pH and makes the environment more hostile to bacteria. She uses salt, which also inhibits bacterial growth. The potato salad is not a neutral medium. It is slightly acidic, slightly salty, made with commercial mayonnaise that contains preservatives. This buys time. There is also the fact that the potatoes were cooked thoroughly, boiled until soft, then cooled, then mixed with the other ingredients. Thorough cooking kills bacteria. The potatoes start out relatively clean. They pick up bacteria from handling and from the air, but they do not start out contaminated the way raw meat might. The bacterial load is lower to begin with. Still, 4 hours is a long time, longer than can be easily explained away. 4 hours in 87-degree heat should produce bacterial growth. The potato salad should, theoretically, be unsafe. But it is not. Or if it is, the level of unsafe is low enough that healthy adults with functioning immune systems can handle it without symptoms. There is an element of collective trust at these picnics. Everyone knows the potato salad has been sitting out. Everyone can see it on the table. And everyone eats it anyway, because potato salad at a picnic is expected, traditional, part of the experience. Nobody wants to be the person who refuses to eat the potato salad because they are worried about bacteria. That would be fussy, paranoid, insulting to the person who made it. So you eat the potato salad. You take a scoop, put it on your plate next to your hot dog and your chips. The potato salad is warm, but it tastes good. Creamy and tangy and full of summer flavor. You eat it without thinking too hard about how long it has been sitting out, or whether it is still safe. You eat it because it is there, because it is good, because this is what you do at a 4th of July picnic. And then the day ends. The picnic is over. The bowl of potato salad, half empty now, goes back into the refrigerator. Your mother will eat the leftovers tomorrow. The potato salad has been out in the heat for 4 hours, then back in the refrigerator, then out again tomorrow. By modern standards, this is insane. By 1976 standards, this is just potato salad. You make it, you serve it, you eat it, you keep it. The potato salad survives all of this without incident. Another mystery of the summer picnic that works despite all the reasons it should not. Your mother has 3 canisters on the counter. Flour, sugar, coffee. The flour canister has been refilled dozens of times, but it has never been emptied completely and washed. There is always a little flour left at the bottom when she pours in the new bag. The sugar is the same. Refilled, used, refilled again, never fully cleaned. The canisters have been on the counter since before you were born. Nothing ever grows in them. Nothing ever goes wrong. The canisters are ceramic or metal, labeled clearly with their contents. Flour in white letters, sugar in white letters, coffee in white letters. They sit in a row, decorative and functional, always full enough to use, but never quite empty. Your mother scoops flour from the canister when she makes biscuits. She scoops sugar when she makes cookies. The canisters are part of the kitchen landscape, permanent fixtures that never move. The flour at the bottom of the canister is older than the flour at the top. Layers of flour, chronologically organized by accident. The oldest flour has been there for months, maybe longer. It sits under the newer flour, compressed slightly, waiting to eventually be used. Your mother does not worry about flour going stale. Flour lasts. Flour is shelf-stable. Flour in a closed canister is fine indefinitely. Modern food storage recommendations suggest rotating dry goods and keeping them in airtight containers to prevent pests and moisture. But the modern recommendations also suggest cleaning the containers periodically, especially if you are adding new flour to old flour. Pests can hide in flour. Weevils, meal moths. They lay eggs in the flour, and the eggs hatch weeks later. If you keep adding new flour without emptying and cleaning the container, you are creating a continuous cycle where pests can thrive. But your mother's flour canister never has pests. Or if it does, they are so rare and so minor that they never become a problem. She scoops flour and uses it and never finds weevils or moths or anything else. The flour is just flour. White, powdery, fine-textured. It makes biscuits and cakes and breading for fried chicken. It works perfectly every time. The sugar canister is the same. White granulated sugar, refilled as needed, never emptied. Sugar is even more stable than flour. It does not spoil. It does not attract pests the way flour does. Sugar can sit in a canister for years and remain exactly the same. Your mother refills the canister when it gets low. She pours the new bag in on top of the old sugar. The old sugar mixes with the new. It all becomes the same sugar. There is something efficient about this system. The canisters are always ready. You never run out of flour or sugar because you refill before the canister is empty. You never have to dig through the cupboard looking for a bag because the canister's right there on the counter. The canisters are beautiful, decorative, functional. They make the kitchen look organized and capable. Cleaning the canisters would require emptying them completely, washing them with soap and water, drying them thoroughly, and then refilling. This takes time and effort. And for what benefit? The flour is fine. The sugar is fine. Cleaning the canisters feels like unnecessary work, the kind of fussy housekeeping that does not actually improve anything. Your mother has better things to do than wash containers that do not need washing. The coffee canister is slightly different. Coffee has oils that can go rancid. Old coffee can make new coffee taste stale. But even the coffee canister rarely gets fully emptied and cleaned. Your mother refills it when it gets low. The coffee tastes fine. A little stale sometimes, maybe, but fine. Nobody complains. The coffee gets made every morning and everyone drinks it. There is a philosophy embedded in this practice. Do not fix what is not broken. The canisters work. They have worked for years. They will continue to work for years more. Emptying and washing them would be change for the sake of change, effort for the sake of effort. The canisters are part of the kitchen's ecosystem. They are stable, predictable, reliable. Why disrupt that? Modern food storage emphasizes freshness and rotation. First in, first out. Clean containers regularly. Check for pests. Avoid mixing old and new. These are good practices in theory, but they require labor and attention. Your mother's canisters require no attention at all. They sit on the counter, always available, always ready. You scoop what you need and move on. The canisters take care of themselves. When you eventually set up your own kitchen, you might buy canisters and use them the same way. Or you might keep flour in the bag and store it in the cupboard, taking it out each time you need it. The canister method feels old-fashioned, but also appealing. Visible, accessible, aesthetically pleasing. Flour and sugar on display, ready to use, part of the kitchen's architecture. The canisters your mother used were not just storage. They were a statement about how a kitchen should function. Practical, efficient, beautiful. And they lasted for decades without ever needing anything more than a refill. Your mother cooks a chicken every Sunday. She puts it in the oven at 350 degrees. She checks it after an hour by cutting into the thickest part of the thigh and looking at the juice. If the juice runs clear, the chicken is done. If it runs pink, it goes back in. She does not own a meat thermometer. She has never owned a meat thermometer. She knows when meat is done, by looking at it, touching it, sometimes just by timing. This method has worked for 30 years. The chicken sits in a roasting pan surrounded by potatoes and carrots. Your mother bastes it once or twice with the drippings from the bottom of the pan. The skin turns golden brown. The kitchen fills with the smell of roasting chicken. After an hour, she opens the oven and pulls out the rack. She takes a knife and cuts into the thigh where it meets the body. She pulls the cut open slightly and looks at the juice that runs out. Clear juice means the chicken is done. The proteins have coagulated. The meat has reached a high enough temperature to cook through. Pink juice means the chicken needs more time. The proteins are still raw. The meat has not reached the necessary temperature. This visual check is how generations of cooks have determined doneness. No thermometer required. Just a knife and experience. Your mother also touches the chicken. She presses the breast with her finger. If it feels firm, it is done. If it feels soft and yielding, it needs more time. This is another test, secondary to the juice test, but part of the overall assessment. Chicken that is cooked through feels different than chicken that is still raw inside. The texture changes. You can feel it if you know what you are feeling for. Sometimes she just knows by timing. A 4-pound chicken takes about an hour and 20 minutes at 350 degrees. She has cooked hundreds of chickens. She knows roughly how long it takes. If the chicken went in at 3 o'clock and it is now 4:30, it is probably done. She checks to confirm, but the timing alone is often enough. Modern food safety guidelines insist on using a meat thermometer. Chicken should reach an internal temperature of 165 degrees Fahrenheit to be safe. Visual inspection is unreliable. Clear juice does not guarantee the chicken has reached 165 degrees. Pink juice does not necessarily mean it has not. The only way to be certain is to measure the temperature with a thermometer inserted into the thickest part of the meat without touching bone. But your mother does not have a thermometer. Meat thermometers are not standard equipment in a 1970s kitchen. Some people have them, but many do not. They are considered unnecessary. Cooking meat is a skill. You learn it by practice. You do not need a tool to tell you what your eyes and hands can already determine. And the method works. Your mother's chicken is always cooked through, never raw in the middle, never pink at the bone, always fully cooked, juicy, tender. She has never served undercooked chicken. She has never made anyone sick. The visual check, the touch check, the timing, all of it combines into a reliable method that produces safe food without measurement. There is confidence in this approach. Your mother trusts her judgment. She does not need external validation from a thermometer. She knows chicken. She has cooked chicken every Sunday for decades. She can tell when it is done. This confidence comes from experience, from repetition, from success. The chicken is always right because she knows how to make it right. The modern insistence on thermometers feels like a loss of skill. Cooking used to be something people knew how to do without tools. You learned by watching, by doing, by making mistakes and correcting them. You developed instinct. A thermometer replaces instinct with data. The data is more accurate, but something is lost in the exchange. The knowledge that comes from experience, the confidence that comes from mastery. Your mother's chicken is legendary in the family. Everyone looks forward to Sunday chicken. The skin is crispy, the meat is juicy, the flavor is perfect. She achieves this without a thermometer, without a recipe, without anything other than her own accumulated knowledge. The chicken is done when she says it is done, and she is always right. When you try to cook chicken in your own kitchen years later, you might buy a meat thermometer. You might use it religiously, checking the temperature multiple times to make sure the chicken reaches 165 degrees. And the chicken will be safe, properly cooked, no risk of foodborne illness. But it might not taste as good as your mother's chicken. Because you were focused on the temperature instead of the chicken. You were following a rule instead of using judgment. The thermometer made the chicken safe, but it did not make it better. Your mother cooked by feel, by sight, by experience. The chicken was always safe and always delicious because she knew what she was doing. The thermometer nobody owned was not missed because it was not needed. The cook was the tool, the knowledge was the instrument, and the Sunday chicken was perfect every single time. Your family drinks well water. It comes straight from the ground, through a pump, into the house. It has never been tested. Nobody knows what is in it. Nobody has ever asked. The water tastes slightly metallic, slightly mineral. It is cold and clear. You drink it every day. You cook with it. You make coffee and tea and lemonade. The well is 40 feet deep and the water is fine. It has always been fine. The pump sits in a small utility room off the kitchen. You can hear it kick on when someone turns on a faucet. A mechanical hum, a vibration through the pipes. The water comes up from the ground, filtered through layers of soil and rock, collected in an underground aquifer that has been there for thousands of years. The well was dug when the house was built. The pump was installed at the same time. Nobody has done anything to the system since except basic maintenance. The water comes out of the tap cold. Noticeably colder than city water. It tastes different, too. Mineral, slightly metallic, not unpleasant, but distinctive. You get used to it. After a while, you prefer it. City water tastes flat and chemical in comparison. The well water tastes real. It tastes like water should taste. Your mother uses well water for everything: drinking, cooking, washing dishes, laundry. The water is untreated except for whatever natural filtration happens as it moves through the ground. No chlorine, no fluoride, no water treatment plant processing it through filters and adding chemicals. Just water from the ground, straight into the house. Modern guidelines recommend testing well water annually, testing for bacteria, nitrates, heavy metals, pesticides, and other contaminants. Well water is not regulated the way municipal water is. The homeowner is responsible for ensuring the water is safe. Testing costs money, but it provides information. You know what is in your water. You know if it is safe to drink. Without testing, you are just assuming everything is fine. But your family never tests the water. The well has been there for 20 years. The water has always been drinkable. Why would you spend money testing water that is obviously fine? You can see it is clear. You can taste that it is good. Nobody has ever gotten sick from the water. Testing feels unnecessary, a waste of money solving a problem that does not exist. The well water probably is fine. Most well water is. Aquifers are naturally filtered. Water moving through soil and rock picks up minerals, but also gets cleaned of larger contaminants. The depth of the well matters too. Deeper wells draw from older, more stable water sources. Shallow wells can be contaminated by surface runoff. Your well is 40 feet deep, deep enough to be relatively safe from surface contamination. But without testing, you do not know for certain. The water could contain nitrates from agricultural runoff. It could contain bacteria from a septic system nearby. It could contain naturally occurring arsenic or radon. These contaminants are invisible. They have no taste. They cause problems over long periods of exposure, not immediately. You could drink contaminated well water for years before noticing anything wrong. Your family drinks the water anyway, every day, multiple glasses per person. The water is refreshing. It is convenient. It is free, in the sense that you do not pay a monthly water bill. The well provides all the water the house needs without cost, beyond the electricity to run the pump. This is one of the benefits of living in the country. You have your own water source. You are independent. There is also a kind of faith involved. Faith that the ground will provide clean water. Faith that nature is fundamentally safe. Faith that your ancestors dug the well in a good location and that the water has been fine for decades, so it will continue to be fine. This faith is not questioned. It is just how things are. The well is part of the property. The water is part of living there. You drink it and trust it and never think too hard about what might be in it. When you move away and start drinking city water, you notice the difference immediately. City water tastes strange, chemical, overtreated. It has been filtered and chlorinated and fluoridated until it barely tastes like water anymore. You miss the well water. The coldness, the mineral taste, the realness of it. Even if the well water was never tested, even if you have no idea what was actually in it, you remember it fondly. It was the water of your childhood. It tasted like home. Years later, you might wonder if the well water was actually safe. You might worry retrospectively about what you were drinking all those years. But probably it was fine. Probably the well was in a good location and the water was clean and your family's trust was justified. Most of the time, that kind of trust works out. The water from the ground is drinkable. The well provides. And families across rural America drink untested well water every day without incident. Your family was one of them. The water was never tested and nobody ever got sick. Another small act of faith in the 1970s that worked exactly as expected. The jelly jar sits on the breakfast table. Grape jelly in a glass jar with a metal lid. There's a spoon in the jar. It has been there since the jar was opened 3 weeks ago. Everyone uses the same spoon to scoop jelly onto their toast. The spoon goes back into the jar. The jar goes back into the refrigerator. The spoon stays in the jar. Nobody sees a problem with this. The jelly never molds. The spoon never causes contamination. This is just how jelly is stored. The spoon is a regular teaspoon from the silverware drawer. It sits in the jelly with the handle sticking up, the bowl submerged in grape jelly. When you want jelly, you pull the spoon out, scoop what you need onto your toast, and push the spoon back into the jar. The jelly closes around the spoon, purple and shiny and thick. The spoon disappears into the jelly until only the handle is visible. Sometimes the spoon has butter on it. Someone made toast, buttered it, then used the same knife to get jelly. But the knife was too short or too wide, so they switched to the spoon. The butter from the knife transferred to the spoon. The spoon went into the jelly jar with butter on it. Now there are small streaks of butter mixed into the grape jelly near the top. Nobody cares. The butter and jelly will be used up soon anyway. It is not a contamination issue. It is just breakfast. Your mother uses the spoon too. She makes toast for herself and scoops jelly from the jar with the communal spoon. The spoon touches her toast. Crumbs from the toast stick to the jelly on the spoon. The spoon goes back into the jar with crumbs attached. The crumbs sink into the jelly. Tomorrow someone else will scoop jelly and the crumbs will come out with it. Nobody notices. Or if they notice, they do not care. Crumbs are just bread. Bread is not dangerous. Modern food safety would condemn this practice immediately. A spoon that stays in the jar collects bacteria from every person who uses it. Mouth bacteria, hand bacteria, bacteria from the toast. The spoon sits in the jar, not quite submerged, exposed to air, a perfect vehicle for contamination. And when the jar goes back in the refrigerator, the bacteria do not die. They slow down, but they do not die. The spoon becomes a bacterial reservoir sitting in the jelly. But the jelly never goes bad. It never molds. It never develops an off-smell or taste. The jelly gets used up within a month, and a new jar replaces it, complete with a new spoon from the drawer. The new spoon stays in the new jar. The cycle repeats. Jar after jar, year after year, the spoon stays in the jelly and nothing goes wrong. Part of the explanation is sugar. Jelly is mostly sugar. Sugar is a preservative. High sugar concentrations inhibit bacterial growth by drawing water out of bacterial cells through osmosis. The bacteria dehydrate and die. Jelly is hostile to bacteria by design. It is meant to be shelf-stable. Even with a spoon sitting in it, even with crumbs and butter mixed in, the jelly resists contamination. The jelly is also acidic. Grapes are acidic, and the jelly-making process does not remove that acidity. Acid inhibits bacterial growth. Between the sugar and the acid, jelly is one of the more stable foods you can leave a spoon in. It is not risk-free, but the risk is low. Lower than most people would guess. Still, a spoon sitting in jelly for 3 weeks accumulates something. Maybe not harmful bacteria, but something. Oxidation, maybe. Residue from repeated contact with toast and butter. The jelly near the top of the jar, where the spoon sits, is probably different from the jelly at the bottom. Slightly contaminated, slightly mixed with foreign substances, but not enough to matter, not enough to taste different, not enough to cause illness. There is convenience in keeping the spoon in the jar. You do not have to get a clean spoon every morning. The spoon is right there, ready, already sticky with jelly. You use it, put it back, done. This saves time. It saves dishes. It saves the mental effort of remembering to get a spoon every time you want jelly. The spoon becomes part of the jar. The jar and spoon are a unit. When the jar is empty, the spoon comes out. Your mother rinses the jar and recycles it, or saves it for storing leftovers. The spoon goes back in the silverware drawer, washed first, of course, but otherwise unremarkable. It is just a spoon. It spent 3 weeks living in a jar of jelly, and now it is back in circulation. Nobody tracks which spoon it was. Nobody worries about whether it is fully clean. It is a spoon. Spoons get used. This one got used in a slightly unconventional way. But so what? The jelly jar with a spoon in it is a small domestic efficiency, a minor violation of food safety norms that produces no consequences. The jelly tastes good. The spoon is convenient. Breakfast happens smoothly every morning with minimal effort. And when the jar is empty, a new jar appears, and the process begins again. 1 spoon, 1 jar, 1 month. Simple, efficient, slightly questionable, and perfectly functional. Your mother brings home a head of lettuce. She tears off the outer leaves and throws them away. The rest of the lettuce gets torn into pieces and put in the salad bowl. She does not wash it. If there is visible dirt, she might rinse it quickly under cold water, but usually she does not. The lettuce goes straight from the grocery bag to the bowl. The same is true for celery, for green onions, for radishes. A quick rinse if they look dirty. Otherwise, nothing. The lettuce is iceberg, pale green and crisp. It comes from the grocery store, wrapped in plastic or sitting loose in the produce section. Your mother picks a head that looks clean. She inspects it briefly for brown spots or damage. If it looks good, it goes in the cart. At home, she tears off the outer leaves because those are the ones that might have been handled by other shoppers or exposed to dirt. The inner leaves are protected. They are clean enough. She tears the lettuce into bite-sized pieces by hand. No knife, just tearing. The pieces go into a large wooden bowl. She adds other vegetables. Tomatoes cut into wedges. Cucumber sliced thin. Radishes sliced even thinner. None of it gets washed unless it looks dirty. The assumption is that the vegetables are already clean. They came from a grocery store. They were handled by professionals. They are fine. Modern food safety guidelines insist on washing all produce, even pre-washed salad greens. Produce can be contaminated with bacteria from soil, from handling, from irrigation water, from processing equipment. Lettuce in particular has been linked to numerous foodborne illness outbreaks. E. coli, Salmonella, Listeria. These bacteria can be present on lettuce even when the lettuce looks perfectly clean. Washing under running water removes some, though not all, of the bacteria. It is a basic precaution that should never be skipped. But your mother skips it most of the time. The lettuce looks clean. It feels clean. It is crisp and fresh and unblemished. Washing it feels unnecessary. Besides, washing lettuce is annoying. You have to separate the leaves, rinse each one, shake off the water, dry them somehow. It is extra work for a benefit that is not obvious. The lettuce is going to taste the same whether you wash it or not. You might as well save the effort. The salad gets served at dinner. Everyone eats it. Nobody gets sick. This happens multiple times a week. Lettuce salads, cucumber salads, sliced tomatoes, vegetables that go straight from the store to the table with minimal washing. And nobody has a problem. No food poisoning. No intestinal distress. The vegetables are fine. They have always been fine. Part of the reason this works is that produce in the 1970s comes from a smaller, more local supply chain. The lettuce was probably grown within 100 miles of where you live. It was harvested recently. It passed through fewer hands and fewer facilities. There are fewer opportunities for contamination. Modern produce travels thousands of miles, passes through multiple distribution centers, gets handled by dozens of people. The supply chain is longer and more complex. The risk is higher. There is also the fact that most produce contamination does not cause illness. You eat a piece of lettuce with a few bacteria on it. Your stomach acid kills the bacteria. Your immune system handles it. Only when the bacterial load is high, or the bacteria is particularly virulent, do you actually get sick. Most of the time, unwashed vegetables are harmless. Your mother also chooses her vegetables carefully. She inspects them in the store. She avoids anything that looks wilted or damaged or old. Fresh vegetables are less likely to be contaminated. Damaged vegetables have openings where bacteria can enter. Old vegetables have had more time for bacteria to multiply. By choosing well, your mother is reducing risk even without washing. The celery and green onions get the same treatment. A quick rinse if they look dirty. Otherwise, straight to the cutting board. The radishes might get a rinse because they come from the ground and sometimes have visible dirt. But the rinse is quick, not thorough. Just a pass under cold water to remove the obvious dirt. The radishes are sliced and added to the salad still damp from rinsing. There is no salad spinner. There are no paper towels dedicated to drying vegetables. The vegetables are used wet or dry, depending on how they came from the store. Wet lettuce makes the salad dressing watery. Dry lettuce holds dressing better. But this is not something your mother worries about. The salad is the salad. Wet or dry, washed or unwashed, it gets eaten. When you eventually learn that you are supposed to wash all vegetables thoroughly, it feels excessive. Your mother made salads for 40 years without washing vegetables, and everyone survived. Why the sudden need to wash everything? The answer, again, is risk reduction. Modern food safety aims to minimize risk, not just avoid catastrophic outcomes. Washing vegetables reduces the risk of foodborne illness. Even if the risk is small, reducing it is worthwhile. But your mother's vegetables were fine. Unwashed or barely washed, they were crisp and fresh and delicious. The salads were a regular part of dinner. Nobody ever got sick from them. The vegetables came from the store, got torn or sliced, and went directly to the table. Simple, efficient, slightly risky, and completely functional. Another practice that worked through luck and circumstance, and the fact that most of the time, food is safer than we fear. The chest freezer in the basement contains mysteries. There is a package of pork chops from March, a container of chili from November, ground beef wrapped in white butcher paper with a date written in marker from 6 months ago. Your mother pulls these out as needed. The pork chops get thawed and cooked. They taste fine. The freezer is a time capsule where food waits indefinitely. Nobody worries about freezer burn or how long something has been frozen. Frozen is frozen. It keeps. The freezer is a large white chest in the basement, humming constantly, coated with frost on the inside. You lift the heavy lid, and cold air rolls out, visible in the warmer basement air. The freezer is packed full. Meat on the bottom. Frozen vegetables in bags on top. Containers of leftovers stacked wherever they fit. Everything is frozen solid, covered with ice crystals, labeled with dates if you are lucky, unlabeled if you are not. Your mother digs through the freezer, looking for something to make for dinner. She moves bags of frozen corn and peas aside. She lifts out a container of spaghetti sauce from September. Under that, a package of chicken breasts with no date. Under that, the pork chops from March. She pulls out the pork chops. They are frozen into a solid block, wrapped in white freezer paper that is now covered with ice. She brings them upstairs to thaw. Modern guidelines suggest using frozen meat within a certain time frame. Ground beef and poultry within 3 to 4 months. Pork and beef cuts within 4 to 6 months. After that, the quality deteriorates. Freezer burn sets in. The meat dries out, develops off flavors, loses texture. It is still safe to eat indefinitely if kept frozen, but the quality suffers. Most people prefer to use frozen meat within a few months while it is still at its best. But your mother's pork chops have been frozen for 8 months. They are well past the recommended window. They have freezer burn in places, white and dry where the meat has been exposed to air. Your mother cuts off the freezer burned parts and cooks the rest. The pork chops are a bit tough, a bit dry, but they are edible. They taste like pork chops. Not the best pork chops, but acceptable. Your family eats them for dinner without complaint. The chili from November is even older. Frozen for almost a year. Your mother thaws it in a pot on the stove, heating it slowly until it is bubbling. The chili tastes fine. Maybe a bit less flavorful than when it was fresh, but fine. The freezer has preserved it. The freezer preserves everything. Time does not matter in the freezer. Food goes in and waits until it is needed. Months, a year, longer. The freezer keeps it. There is a freedom in this approach. Your mother does not have to plan carefully or use food within a specific time frame. The freezer is a safety net. She cooks a big batch of chili, freezes half, and it waits there until she wants chili again. Might be next month, might be next year. The chili will be there, frozen, ready. This makes cooking less stressful, less wasteful. You can cook in large batches and store the extras without worrying about when you will use them. The ground beef wrapped in butcher paper is a mystery. The date says 6 months ago, but your mother cannot remember what it was for. Hamburgers, maybe, or meatloaf. She thaws it anyway. The beef is grayish-brown from freezer burn, but still usable. She browns it and uses it for tacos. The beef tastes fine, a bit dry, a bit off, but covered in taco seasoning and salsa, it is perfectly acceptable. Nobody at dinner knows the beef was frozen for 6 months. Nobody would care if they did. The chest freezer is not organized. There is no system for rotating stock or using older items first. Food gets added to the freezer when there is space. Food gets removed when it is needed. Sometimes you find something you forgot about. Oh, we still have that roast from last year. Sometimes you find something unidentifiable. A foil-wrapped package with no label. You thaw it and discover what it is. Usually it is fine. Modern freezers are often better organized. People use labels, dates, rotation systems. First in, first out. Use older items before newer items. Keep similar foods together. This prevents waste and ensures quality. But your mother's freezer is chaos. A jumble of packages and containers and bags, frozen into layers, excavated as needed. The lack of organization does not matter because everything is frozen. Everything keeps. You find what you need eventually. There is something reassuring about a full freezer. It represents security. Food stored for the future. Meals waiting to be made. Your family will not go hungry as long as the freezer is full. The chest freezer in the basement is a resource, a backup, a store of plenty. The food inside is months old, poorly labeled, freezer burned, and perfectly functional. It gets thawed, cooked, and eaten without ceremony. The freezer does its job. The food waits. Time passes. And when the time comes, the food is still there, frozen solid, ready to be used. The coffee percolates in the morning and then sits on the stove, burner turned to low, for the rest of the day. Your father pours a cup at 6 in the morning. Your mother pours one at 10. Your grandmother stops by at 2 in the afternoon and has a cup. The coffee has been sitting on heat for 8 hours. It is thick and bitter and slightly burned. Nobody makes a fresh pot. You just drink what is there. It is coffee. It is always available. The percolator sits on the back burner. Glass knob on top bubbling occasionally as the coffee inside stays just below boiling. The coffee was fresh at 6 in the morning when it finished percolating. By 10, it has lost its brightness. By noon, it tastes strong and slightly harsh. By 2 in the afternoon, it is definitely bitter. By evening, it is nearly undrinkable, thick and dark and acrid. But your grandmother drinks it anyway. She adds cream and sugar. The cream and sugar mask some of the bitterness. She drinks the coffee and says it is good. Your mother does not make a fresh pot until the next morning. 1 pot per day. That is the rule. The pot gets made in the morning and it lasts until bedtime. If you want coffee, you pour from the pot on the stove. It does not matter what time it is. The coffee is there. Hot, bitter, reliable. You do not waste coffee by pouring it out and making fresh. You drink what was made. Modern coffee culture would find this horrifying. Coffee begins to deteriorate within 20 minutes of brewing. The volatile aromatic compounds that give coffee its flavor evaporate. The remaining compounds oxidize. Keeping coffee on heat accelerates this process. After an hour, coffee tastes noticeably worse. After 8 hours, it is barely recognizable as coffee. It is brown, bitter liquid that contains caffeine, but has lost everything else that makes coffee good. But your family is not drinking coffee for the flavor. They are drinking it for the caffeine, for the warmth, for the ritual. Coffee is what you drink in the morning and throughout the day. It does not need to taste perfect. It needs to be hot and caffeinated. The all-day pot achieves this. 1 pot, 1 day, minimal effort. Your mother makes coffee once, and it serves the entire household until bedtime. There is also an economic element. Coffee costs money. Making multiple pots per day uses more coffee. Your mother makes 1 pot with enough coffee for 6 or 7 cups. That pot gets stretched across the whole day. If she made fresh pots every few hours, she would use twice as much coffee. The all-day pot is efficient. It conserves resources. Nothing is wasted. The percolator itself is designed to keep coffee hot. The burner stays on low, just warm enough to maintain temperature without boiling. This works in the sense that the coffee stays hot, but it also continues cooking the coffee. The flavors break down. The bitterness intensifies. By afternoon, the coffee tastes like it has been punished. But it is hot. That counts for something. Your father drinks the morning coffee when it is still relatively fresh. He gets the best version. Your mother drinks mid-morning coffee, already declining but still acceptable. Your grandmother drinks afternoon coffee, bitter and over-extracted, but drinkable with enough cream and sugar. Everyone adapts to the coffee as it exists at the time they drink it. Nobody complains. This is just how coffee works in this house. There is a social element, too. The coffee on the stove is always ready for visitors. Your grandmother stops by unannounced. Your mother offers coffee. The coffee is already made, already hot. Your mother just pours 2 cups and they sit at the kitchen table talking. No waiting for a fresh pot. No apologizing that there is no coffee. The coffee is always there. This makes hospitality easy, effortless. The pot on the stove is ready for anyone who needs it. When you eventually move out and start making your own coffee, you might be horrified by the idea of all-day coffee. You might make a fresh cup every time you want coffee. Single-serve machines make this possible. The coffee is always fresh, always optimal. But you will also make many more cups of coffee per day, use much more coffee, spend much more time and attention on coffee. The efficiency of the all-day pot is lost. Your mother's coffee pot sits on the stove from 6 in the morning until 10 at night. 16 hours. The coffee inside transforms from fresh to stale to bitter, to nearly undrinkable. But it gets drunk, every cup. The pot is empty by bedtime. And in the morning, your mother starts again. Fresh coffee, percolating on the stove, ready to last another day. The cycle repeats. 1 pot, 1 day, every day, for years. The coffee is never great, but it is always there. The bread lives in a metal bread box on the counter. Not in a plastic bag. not in the refrigerator, just in the box. The box is not airtight. It has vents on the sides for air circulation. The bread sits in there for a week, maybe longer. It dries out eventually, but it does not mold quickly. When it gets too stale, your mother makes French toast or bread pudding. Nothing is wasted. The bread box is how bread is stored. This is simply what people do. The bread box is painted metal, cream-colored, or pale yellow, with a hinged lid that closes with a soft click. Your mother keeps 2 loaves in there at a time. 1 white bread for sandwiches and toast. 1 whole wheat for your father, who thinks whole wheat is healthier. The loaves sit side by side in their store packaging, opened at one end, the bread exposed to the air inside the box. The bread dries out in the bread box. This is inevitable. Without a sealed bag or airtight container, moisture escapes from the bread and evaporates. After 3 or 4 days, the bread is noticeably drier. The crust is harder. The crumb is less soft. After a week, the bread is definitely stale. Not moldy, just stale. Dry and firm and no longer ideal for sandwiches, but still usable. Your mother makes French toast from stale bread. The dry bread absorbs the egg mixture better than fresh bread. The French toast comes out perfectly textured, crispy on the outside and custardy inside. Stale bread is actually better for French toast than fresh bread. The bread box produces a steady supply of slightly stale bread perfect for this purpose. Bread pudding is another use for stale bread. Your mother tears the dry bread into chunks, soaks them in a mixture of milk, eggs, and sugar, and bakes it into a sweet dessert. The stale bread absorbs the custard and transforms into something soft and rich. Again, stale bread works better than fresh. The bread box makes this possible. Modern bread storage typically involves keeping bread in a sealed plastic bag to retain moisture. Sealed bread stays soft longer. It does not dry out as quickly, but sealed bread also molds faster. The moisture that keeps the bread soft also encourages mold growth. Bread in a sealed bag might stay soft for a week, but if you do not use it within that week, it molds. Bread in a bread box dries out, but rarely molds. It gives you more time to use it, just in a different form. The bread box design with ventilation prevents mold by allowing moisture to escape. Mold needs moisture. Dry bread does not support mold growth as readily. The bread box creates an environment where bread slowly dries rather than molding. This was useful in an era before everyone had large freezers where excess bread could be stored frozen. The bread box kept bread usable for longer without refrigeration or freezing. There is something appealing about a bread box on the counter. It is visible, decorative, functional. The bread is always accessible. You do not have to open the refrigerator or dig through a cupboard. You just open the bread box and take what you need. The bread is right there, part of the kitchen landscape, ready for toast or sandwiches or whatever meal requires it. Your mother refills the bread box when the loaves are gone. She buys 2 new loaves at the grocery store and puts them in the box. The cycle begins again. Fresh bread that will slowly dry over the course of a week. The bread at the end of the week is different from the bread at the beginning, but it is all usable. Nothing is wasted. Fresh bread for sandwiches, stale bread for French toast. The bread box manages this transition automatically. Modern homes rarely have bread boxes. Bread comes in plastic bags designed to be resealed with a twist tie or plastic clip. The bags keep the bread soft. People expect soft bread. Stale bread is considered failure. If bread gets stale, it gets thrown away, not repurposed. The idea of intentionally letting bread dry out so you can make French toast feels backward. Why not just keep the bread fresh and make French toast with fresh bread if you want it? But there is wisdom in the bread box method. It extends the usable life of bread by changing what usable means. Fresh bread and stale bread are both useful, just for different purposes. The bread box creates stale bread automatically without effort, ensuring you always have the right kind of bread for French toast or bread pudding. It is a passive system that works with time instead of fighting against it. The bread box also saves space in the refrigerator. Bread does not need to be refrigerated. It keeps fine at room temperature for the time it takes to use it. Refrigerating bread actually makes it go stale faster through a process called retrogradation, where the starch molecules crystallize. The bread box, by keeping bread at room temperature in a ventilated space, preserves it better than refrigeration, while also preventing mold. Your mother's bread box sits on the counter for decades. The paint chips slightly at the corners. The hinge gets a bit loose, but the box still works. It still holds bread. It still keeps the bread usable for a week or more. When the bread box finally breaks or gets replaced, something is lost. A way of storing bread that worked with the nature of bread, instead of trying to keep it artificially fresh forever. The bread box accepted that bread dries out and made that process useful. Modern storage fights against drying and creates waste when the fight is lost. The bread box was simpler, more forgiving, and strangely more efficient. Sunday dinner includes roast beef and gravy. After dinner, the gravy stays in the roasting pan on the stove. It sits there overnight, cooling slowly, developing a skin on top. In the morning, your mother scrapes off the skin, reheats the gravy, and serves it over toast or biscuits for breakfast. The gravy has been unrefrigerated for 12 hours. It tastes rich and salty and exactly right. Nobody has ever gotten sick from overnight gravy. The roasting pan is large and heavy, dark with years of use. The gravy pools in the bottom, thick and brown and glossy with fat. When dinner ends, your mother turns off the oven and leaves everything where it is. The pan is too hot to move, too heavy to lift when full. It stays on the stove, the gravy cooling gradually as the kitchen cools through the evening. By midnight, the gravy is room temperature. A skin has formed on top, a thin membrane of congealed fat and protein. The gravy underneath the skin is still liquid, thick and viscous. The pan sits on the stove through the night. The kitchen is dark and quiet. The gravy waits. In the morning, your mother comes into the kitchen and turns the burner on under the pan. She scrapes off the skin with a spoon and discards it. The gravy underneath is still good. She stirs it as it heats, adding a little water if it has thickened too much overnight. The gravy comes back to life. It bubbles gently. Steam rises. The smell fills the kitchen. She makes toast or biscuits and serves the reheated gravy over them. This is breakfast. Gravy over toast. It sounds strange, but it tastes wonderful, rich and savory and satisfying. The gravy that sat out overnight is the base for Monday morning breakfast. This happens after every Sunday roast. The gravy is never refrigerated. It always sits out. It is always fine. Modern food safety guidelines are unambiguous about gravy. Gravy is a potentially hazardous food. It contains meat drippings, fat, and often flour or cornstarch. It is an ideal medium for bacterial growth. Gravy should be refrigerated within 2 hours of cooking. Leaving gravy at room temperature overnight is dangerous. Bacteria multiply in the warm gravy. Some bacteria produce toxins that survive reheating. Eating gravy that has been left out overnight carries real risk. But your mother's gravy never causes problems. The gravy sits out for 12 hours. It gets reheated and eaten. Nobody gets sick. This happens dozens of times over the years. Every Sunday, roast produces leftover gravy. Every Monday morning, the gravy gets reheated. The pattern is consistent and the outcomes are consistently fine. Part of the explanation might be that the gravy is very hot when it comes off the stove Sunday evening. It takes hours to cool down. The gravy passes through the danger zone temperature range relatively slowly because there is so much mass. A large pan of hot gravy cools more slowly than a small container of sauce. By the time the gravy reaches temperatures where bacteria can multiply rapidly, many hours have passed. Then it only spends a few hours in the danger zone before cooling below it. The reheating also matters. Your mother does not just warm the gravy. She brings it to a full boil. The gravy bubbles vigorously for several minutes. This kills most bacteria that might have grown overnight. Not all bacteria, not bacterial toxins, but enough to reduce the risk significantly. The combination of slow cooling and thorough reheating creates a situation where bacterial growth is limited. There is also the salt content. The gravy is salty. Your mother seasons it well during cooking. Salt inhibits bacterial growth. It does not prevent growth entirely, but it slows it. The gravy is salty enough to buy some time. Not enough to make it shelf-stable, but enough that 12 hours at room temperature does not turn it into a bacterial catastrophe. The fat content might help too. Gravy is fatty. The fat forms a layer on top as the gravy cools. This layer provides some protection against airborne contamination. The fat seals the gravy, creating a slight barrier. Not a complete barrier, not real protection, but something. The skin your mother scrapes off in the morning is mostly fat and protein that has separated from the liquid gravy below. Still, by any modern measure, this practice is risky. 12 hours unrefrigerated is too long. The gravy should be refrigerated as soon as it cools enough to handle. Reheating helps, but does not eliminate all risk. The fact that nobody gets sick is a combination of luck, salt, heat, and possibly some bacterial strains being less virulent than others. But to your mother, the gravy is fine. It smells fine. It looks fine. It tastes fine. She has been doing this for 30 years. The gravy has never made anyone sick. The idea of refrigerating the heavy roasting pan overnight and then trying to reheat congealed gravy the next morning feels more difficult than just leaving it out. The gravy stays liquid if left on the stove. It is easier to reheat, easier to stir, easier to work with. The Monday morning gravy over toast is a treat, something to look forward to after Sunday dinner. The gravy is rich and comforting. It makes Monday feel less like Monday. This ritual is part of the weekly rhythm. Sunday roast, Monday gravy breakfast. The gravy that sits out overnight makes this possible. Refrigerating the gravy would change the texture, make reheating harder, disrupt the ritual. Your mother sees no reason to change what works. And so the gravy sits on the stove, cooling overnight, waiting for morning. Another small kitchen practice that defies modern guidelines and works anyway. It is quiet now in that kitchen. The counter where the butter dish sat. The stove where the coffee percolated all day. The bread box that is not there anymore. The wooden cutting board that maybe ended up in a thrift store, or maybe in a landfill. The cast iron skillet that someone kept, probably because cast iron lasts forever. Your mother is not cooking this way anymore. Maybe she learned the new rules. Maybe she read an article about food safety and started using a meat thermometer. Maybe she still does everything the old way, because it has worked for 50 years, and she sees no reason to change. Or maybe she is gone now, and the kitchen belongs to someone else. Someone who keeps butter in the refrigerator and replaces sponges every week and washes chicken without knowing that is exactly what you are not supposed to do. The rules changed. That is what happened. Not all at once. Gradually. Through the 80s and 90s and into the 2000s. Food safety became a public conversation. Guidelines appeared. Labels warned. Scientists studied bacterial growth and published papers. The USDA issued recommendations. The FDA mandated changes. Television shows taught people to fear their own kitchens. And slowly, the old ways became the wrong ways. Some of the new rules are better, genuinely safer. Washing your hands matters. Keeping raw meat separate from vegetables matters. Refrigerating leftovers promptly matters. These are good practices based on real science. They prevent real illness. Nobody is arguing against washing your hands. But some of what was lost was good too. The confidence, the instinct, the sense that you could trust yourself to know when food was safe. The understanding that came from doing something thousands of times and learning to read the signs. Your mother did not need a thermometer to know when chicken was done because she knew. She had cooked enough chickens to recognize doneness by sight and touch. That knowledge was valuable. It was earned. And it is mostly gone now. Modern kitchens are safer, probably. Fewer people get food poisoning. Fewer children get sick from undercooked meat or eggs left out too long. The guidelines work. They protect people. This is good. But modern kitchens also run on fear. Fear of bacteria you cannot see. Fear of making a mistake. Fear that you do not know what you are doing and need constant guidance from experts and instruments. This fear is useful if it prevents illness, but it is exhausting if it replaces confidence and instinct with anxiety. Your mother's kitchen was not perfect. Some of those practices were risky. Some of them probably should have caused problems. It is strange that they did not. Lucky, maybe. Or maybe the risks were smaller than we now believe. Maybe most food is safer than we fear. Maybe most bacteria do not actually make healthy people sick. Maybe the danger zone is real, but the margins are larger than the guidelines admit. It is hard to know. The science says one thing. The lived experience of millions of people says something slightly different. What is clear is that an entire way of cooking has vanished. Not because it failed catastrophically, not because everyone who cooked that way got sick, but because the culture changed. Because we learned more about bacteria and decided to be more cautious. Because lawsuits and regulations and public health campaigns pushed everyone towards safer practices. The old ways became embarrassing, ignorant, dangerous, and people stopped doing them. If your mother is still alive, she might remember all of this. The butter on the counter, the meat thawing overnight, the gravy sitting out until morning. She might remember it fondly, or she might be embarrassed by it now. She might insist she never did those things, even though she did them every day for decades. Memory is strange that way. We forget what we used to do once we learn it was wrong. Or maybe she still does some of it. Maybe the butter is still on the counter. Maybe the dish towel still hangs damp on the oven door. Maybe she still tastes from the wooden spoon and puts it back in the sauce. Old habits are hard to break, especially when they worked for 50 years. Especially when you know, deep in your bones, that the food is fine. The kitchen rules of the 1970s have vanished. They belong to a different time. A time when people trusted their senses more than scientists, when kitchens ran on instinct instead of guidelines, when food was food, not a series of bacterial hazards to be managed with thermometers and timers. That time is gone. Those kitchens are gone. The women who cooked that way are mostly gone too. But the memory remains, the taste of overnight gravy over Monday morning toast. The butter that was always soft enough to spread, the raw cookie dough on the beater, the well water that tasted like minerals and earth. These memories are specific and physical and impossible to recreate, not because the recipes are lost, but because the whole context is lost. The confidence, the instinct, the lack of fear. You cannot recreate that. You can only remember it. So here we are. In modern kitchens with refrigerated butter and sanitized cutting boards and meat thermometers clipped to every roast. Safer, probably. Better, maybe. But different. undeniably different. And sometimes, late at night, you might wonder what it would be like to cook the old way, to trust yourself instead of the guidelines, to let the gravy sit overnight and the butter soften on the counter, to know, without measuring, without checking, without worrying, that everything is fine. But you probably will not do it. The rules have changed. You have learned the new ways. And maybe the new ways are better. Probably they are. But something was lost when those old kitchen rules vanished. Something that cannot quite be measured or captured or explained. Just the sense that cooking used to be simpler, more confident, less afraid. And somehow, despite everything we now know about bacteria and danger zones and food safety, it worked. Your mother knew what she was doing. Her mother knew what she was doing. And their mothers before them. The food was good. The families were fed. The kitchens were warm. And everyone survived the butter on the counter and the sponge that lasted for weeks and the chicken rinsed under the tap. They survived it all. And maybe, just maybe, they knew something we have forgotten in our rush to make everything safer. That food is more forgiving than we think, that instinct matters, that sometimes the old way was good enough. The 1970s kitchen is gone, but it existed. It fed families, it worked, and for those who remember it, it was home. If you made it this far, thank you for listening. If these vanished kitchen rules stirred up memories of your own, I would love to hear them in the comments. Hit that like button if you enjoyed this strange journey into questionable food safety practices that somehow worked. Subscribe if you want more stories from the America that used to be. And remember, we are on Spotify now too. Link in the description. It is 2026 now. The refrigerator hums. The thermometer beeps. Everything is measured and timed and perfectly safe. But somewhere, in a memory that will not quite fade, your mother is standing at the counter with a wooden spoon, tasting the sauce, putting the spoon back in the pot. And the sauce is perfect. It always was. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next one.